Okay. Nothing like starting an introduction out with a great big throat clearing. Welcome to Dorks Being Dorks, a Brewster Baseball Association podcast where we talk about out of the park and how it works in the BBA. I'm Ron Collins, the general manager of the Yellow Springs 9, and today I have lead historian and general manager of the Long Beach Surfers, Stephen Lane, with me today. Thanks, Stephen. Thanks for coming in.
Hi, Ron. Thanks for having me.
Today we're going to talk about the All-Star ballot, which I think is a big deal for us right now because literally as we speak, we have a All-Star ballot that is open. We're one game away from one regular season day away from the All-Star break. And so I think this is a fantastic time to spend a little bit of time talking about how we in the BBA look at the All-Star game and the balloting and what our culture is around that. If you're up for that, Stephen, I think that'd be fun.
That sounds great.
Okay. So let me ask you just kind of straight off, how do you think about the All-Star game? Is it something that you, how do you value it? I'll put it that way.
I value it as a kind of a showcase, kind of a more of a fun kind of thing. I try to spread votes out around different teams. I don't want to have an All-Star game that's full of, all the best players from the best team in one league. I kind of try to spread the love so that we can get a look at guys all over the league.
Obviously, we do in the BBA, we do a similar thing to what the Major League Baseball does in that each one of our championship general managers from the year before inherits the results of the vote for the starters, but then gets the opportunity to fill in the rest of the roster. So I think one of the things in my mind when I look at the All-Star voting itself, it struck me when you're talking about loading up the roster with all the people from one team. If that ends up happening, that puts a lot of stress on the poor general manager who has to go in and fill out the rest.
Right.
Not that I have ever really been able to do that very often. I've only had two opportunities, and neither one of them, I think actually the game overrode me. Maybe that's a question I can ask you. The way that we've done ballots in the BBA has changed over the years, right? We had OOTPOU that would give us the ballots for some time. I think we had one year where we did just straight out a listing from somebody, and now we use Stats Plus. How do you feel about those tool sets, and how do you feel about Stats Plus? This is our second year, I think, now in Stats Plus.
Yeah, I like the OOTPOU well enough, and I like Stats Plus as well. I thought the in-game was a little bit difficult. I think Stats Plus is the best. The one downside compared to OOTPOU is that after you vote, and I think this is because you might be able to change your vote after you submit your vote multiple times, but you can't go and look at the live updating results like you could with the online utility, where after you vote it's locked in and you could kind of check back in before the voting ended and see how the votes were coming in.
Yeah, I admit I do kind of miss that. That was kind of a fun aspect of it. Sometimes people talk about the All-Star game in our world because in the BBA, you're our historian, so you're obviously very steeped in the concept of what our history means. We have 60, I think next year will be our 65th year. I have to think about that. We got a lot of years of history, and every year we also go through a Hall of Fame process. And one of the complaints that I hear about people voting for the All-Stars is on occasion people will use All-Star games as a element in their conversation about whether they're a real Hall of Famer, right? If they've showed up on the All-Star game 15 times, that says something versus one time or two times or whatever. Do you think about that at all as you're going about making your decisions?
I don't. I really don't have any connection between All-Star appearances and Hall of Fame voting. And now, people can vote for the Hall of Fame however they want. I'm definitely going to disagree with some of the ways people approach it, but everybody values All-Stars and Hall of Fame credentials in their own way. Personally, I think that because of the way the All-Star team gets compiled with, guys who, if you have a hot first half, you could push off somebody who is going to end up having a better year, or you could have a player who, is maybe playing a very high offense position like first base, who just happens to be in the same league with another player who could also be in a Hall of Fame track. So, you look at either they are alternating years as All-Stars, or one guy just always has a better first half and he ends his career with 10 All-Star appearances, and the other guy, who may be just as Hall of Fame worthy, ends his career with 1 or 2. So that's just one of the reasons I don't really put it down.
That's kind of one of Ted's conversations about his second baseman in Claudio DeFazio. Is for years California has been a slow starter. Recently that has not been the case, but for years California was a slow starter, and DeFazio was one of those. And his argument is that DeFazio ends the season being the best or among the best of the infielders at his position. So
right.
I always think that's kind of interesting. In the Hall of Fame voting, I would love to have something similar to what we have in Stats Plus, looking at stats by position for a player, right?
Yes.
That's one of the things I like about Stats Plus, is that you get a whole range of the statistical output of the players, whereas in OOTP, OU, I don't think that was quite as robust. So anyway, let me ask, the game itself, do you actually care about the game?
I kind of do care about the game. I mean, in the sense that I will go and open up the box score and see what happened. In the past, I've done write-ups on it. I guess I don't really care who wins or put too much thought into it, but I do like to take a look at it. And
I like to take a look at the way my players did.
Yeah, it's always, and it turns out some really interesting things. One of my favorites was last season when my second baseman Sloan Daniel, who eventually won the Gilstrom, ended up playing the entire All-Star game, full 9 innings in left field, for whatever reason. So,
manager's decision.
Yeah.
No, actually, one of the things that I love about the game itself, I'm with you. I don't really care who wins unless my league wins, in which case it's a very important thing. The thing that I like the most about the All-Star game is that if I look at it close enough, I can always come up with an interesting team news or two around. It was either last year or the year before last, I had a team news about Lucas McNeil and his wife being upset because Lucas was held out for most of the game. And I like the fictional aspect of what it brings to the league. But then I'm one of those guys that really likes the fictional aspect of everything before it's all said and done.
Yeah.
I was thinking about having some conversation about the way we went about actually assessing our All-Star votes. And it actually struck me, and we were talking before our little conversation here, that I think what we're going to do here is just step through either one or both of the leagues, kind of position by position. And I'd like you, Stephen, to talk about how you actually make choices. Have you made your ballot yet?
I have, yes.
Okay, so, and I have too. I posted mine openly on the board here earlier this morning. What we can do, I think, is just kind of step through the positions, and let's see how we agree and disagree on the way we look at making our choices. Does that make sense?
Sounds good.
You want to start with Johnson, or you want to start with Frick?
Yeah, Johnson sounds good.
Alrighty. Start at the top. Catchers.
Catchers. All right.
Okay, what do you do?
What do? Normally, I'll just go and the Stats Plus is great with these sortable categories. So usually first I'll sort by WAR, just to get a sense of who the top guys are. And one of my fundamental beliefs about the All-Star game is that I want the best hitters. So after I sort by WAR, maybe I'll go and sort by WRC Plus and then WOBA. And if there's a big enough gap between the top guy and the next guy, as long as he's not a complete cement wall on defense, then usually the top offensive guy will get my vote.
For me, I always sort by WAR first, but usually I'm sorting by WAR. I like Ted and Kyle's conversation on one of their latest podcasts about WAR, right? In this case, right, we look at Shag Hopkins at 2.2 WAR and Sin Mai, I think is how you pronounce that, but I don't know,
Yeah.
is 2.1. 2.2 to 2.1 is not a value to me, right?
Even to 1.9 with Francisco Flores, there's no
Right.
you can't call those any different.
Right, but I'll make that initial quick sort because the jump to me from 1.9 to 1.5 in a half a year, uh, Charm City's Sean Smith is at 1.5. That's getting to the point where it's big enough that unless I see something really remarkable in Sean Smith,
Yeah,
it just says that I'm down to three guys, right? Hopkins, Mai, and Flores.
exactly.
And then I also do exactly what you just talked about with looking at. Usually, I use weighted ones created plus versus WOBA. So, what did you come out with for your? If you're willing to share openly, what did you come out with for your choice?
For here it was Shag Hopkins, and that's it was a pretty easy decision because of that 18-point difference in weighted runs created plus from the second place Francisco Flores. Hopkins obviously not the best defender on this list, but the offense is just so far above the other guys that he gets the nod.
I ended up actually going with Flores myself. Going against some of my earlier comment about I do end up tending to focus more on hitters than I focus on defense, but I liked Flores from a defensive standpoint better. I definitely struggled between Hopkins and Flores.
All right.
I would not argue with any of those players.
Yeah, well, I'm glad we've got a disagreement here on the first one. I think that bodes well.
There you go. Let's go to first base.
So same thing here. Look at the WAR and then look at the WRC plus, and this one was probably a little bit closer, but my choice was Rutledge here.
Why did you say it was closer?
I feel like the gap between Rutledge and Manuel Martinez here is a little closer than the gap between Flores and Hopkins at the catcher position.
Mm-hmm. I almost go the opposite way because for me, and I don't know why, I don't really quite get the weighted runs created plus gap there. Maybe it's a park thing, or maybe it's completely on the defense and the zone rating thing. But because when I look at the slash lines for Rutledge, they're just all better. They're just all massively better. The one that I actually debated putting on, and this is for the one I actually was questioning, is Yancy Cravat. And the only reason that I would come up with him is his 30 home runs, right? Which would make me feel like I'm voting like a standard all-star game, because sometimes you'll see a guy with a big gaudy number, and I'm actually going to do that later on. There's going to be a gaudy number that will change my opinion on something.
Okay, I'm looking forward to that, and I agree. Home runs is the first counting stat that I'll go to if I need to break a tie.
Yeah.
So I would be all on board for vote for Cravat.
But I ended up with Rutledge just because I felt like actually the gap to me between Rutledge and Martinez was pretty large, and it's a 50-point in batting average, which is not that big of a deal, but he's got a 19-point OBP and 27-point slugging gap between Huntsville and Jacksonville. And Huntsville, yes, has his, Kyle's got his left-hander park, but Jacksonville is not exactly a hitter-poor park. So I just, from a park standpoint, that didn't influence my thought pattern as much.
Makes sense.
Okay. Second base.
Okay. Man, it looks like I'm probably just looking like a real simplistic voter here, but I think that I have a little bit of an explanation for it, and we'll probably see it later on down the ballot. But Arbizo is my vote at second base. Clearly, there's a argument to be made there for Koros. Maybe even Kel Bacon if you want to go that way. But Arbizo kind of edged it out, and I believe this was because I needed to get a Jacksonville representative onto my ballot because Jacksonville was kind of edged out in a couple other positions where I thought that it could go either way, and I went the other way. If that makes any sense at all.
No, it definitely makes sense. I don't generally tend to think a whole lot about team breakouts at this stage. I ended up with Quant Koros from Las Vegas, and to me it was between Arbizo and Koros fairly clearly. I didn't really get into Kel Bacon or Keith Dean as far as that's concerned. Those were the four guys that kind of passed the WAR thing. And, Koros is at 2.5 WAR, 2.1 for Arbizo. Neither one of them are great defensive players before it's all said and done, so that didn't really matter. What actually changed my opinion was Quant Koros' speed, 57 stolen bases in 14 caught steals. That's a pretty healthy success ratio, and at 57 steals, that brings something to the table that I'm not sure we're going to find in a lot of other places. So to me, I'm guessing that that's one of the reasons for his WAR improvement over Arbizo. So that was what actually swung it for me.
Yeah, that's definitely a good argument. That's that 57 stolen bases over twice as much as the next closest there. So
yeah, and so I'm going to be this is when I'm going to be interested to see what the population actually how they go. I'm not sure that our population in the BBA is that excited about stolen bases anymore. All of them pale in relation to Mons Raider.
Yeah.
So I may be an outlier there. I'm interested to see how that goes. Let's talk about third base.
Third base. I've got a vote for Mark Dempsey of Montreal, and this one, Karlamov kind of put up a fight. He's got the on base, but in the end, I went with Dempsey and David Naboru is is kind of right there, but that OBP just didn't quite do it for me.
Yeah, that when we talk about doing the WAR split, right? You get Noburo at 2.6 at the top. In a world where I just kind of scan it and go, he'd be a obvious one for me to pick too because he's got the name recognition. I mean,
absolutely,
it's David freaking Noburo.
Yeah.
But yeah, when you mentioned that his on base percentage, that 292 on base percentage is dramatically off, and then you look at why is he at 2.6, and he's got his 32 homers, which is obviously the big gun, and his zone rating is good, so his defense is good. You could argue that David Nabarro would work in the context of what an all-star game is, especially in real life. But I thought Mark Dempsey was the clear and obvious winner as far as that's concerned. So we're on the same page there.
Yeah.
Shortstop. This is where my gaudy number.
Ah, okay. Let me see if I can look for your gaudy number. Oh, I don't see it. So, do you wanna give that out or?
That gaudy number is 13.2, which is Dashiell R. Fairborn's zone rating halfway through the year. That is an insane zone rating for a shortstop at the All-Star break.
That is an insane zone rating for a shortstop.
In any normal year, I would pick Alex Ramirez in almost a heartbeat because that 3.1 WAR and his 140 weighted runs created. For me, I picked Daniel R. Fairborn because I don't know that I've ever seen that kind of a zone rating in a half of a year. And I trust that Alex Ramirez will be added onto the roster at the end.
That's, I like that logic. And I'm just I to be honest, I don't think I paid any attention to the zone rating here, and maybe I should for shortstop. But yeah, Alex Ramirez was my vote, just because his offense is so far and above anyone else at the position.
Yeah, I mean, that's obvious. As soon as you do the WAR and the weighted runs created splits that we talked about, I mean, there isn't any real question. And I acknowledge to Stu on the board, Stu, you're right. Alex Ramirez is probably the hands-on should win the All-Star selection. But shortstop and center field are the two positions where I will actually look at zone rating, and on very rare occasions you see something huge like this. And I just think if this Fairborn is 21, he's a young kid. If he keeps doing this for years, he's going to be a legend in the field. So we'll see what happens.
I like that vote.
Left field.
Left field. Left field has got some good offense, as you would expect. In the end, I just went with the person who looks like he's having the best offensive season, and that's Justin Jackson. He kind of checks all the boxes. He's got the home run, he's got the WOBA, he's got the weighted runs created plus, and he's even he's on top on WAR as well. So that was an easy one for me.
Yeah, that's a ditto. I don't have a whole lot more to say about that. I like Jacksonville's Victor Barista. I like Cheng Hyuk Chang. Both of those guys are fantastic. Jean-Luc Lacaze, I'd love to have all those guys on my team, but at the end of the day, it seems clear that Justin Jackson is the 23-year-old from Nashville is going to be heading to wherever we're holding the holding the All-Star game this year, in my personal opinion.
Absolutely.
Center field.
Same thing. Best offense here. That's Virgil Schaefer in New Orleans. He's so far above anyone else in the offensive categories, and he's even halfway decent in the field. Certainly not the best, but he's not hurting anybody either.
Yeah, and I think this is an interesting case because we talked about shortstop and center field being places where I will look at zone rating. There really isn't any great zone ratings in the everything's between 5 and -5, not counting just Juan Santana's -13, which is so so bad that makes me have to think about going and figuring out why that's -13. How can you have a -13? Virgil Schaefer is in my opinion a no-brainer in this particular case. Although I would love to vote for Carlos Garcia, my old guy, just because I think he's having a year that he probably never expected to have.
Yeah, it's tough to hold that vote back from one of your favorites or your former players, but.
Yeah. And, maybe now is a good time to take a very quick segue into Homer voting. Although maybe we can wait to do that until we get to the Frick. And that'll be a better situation.
I'll just I'll give you the note about Juan Santana. That's a -13.1 because he's rated with 5 range in the outfield.
Oh my, and he's playing center field.
Yep.
Ooh. Shivers have just gone through my spine. Let's talk about right field.
That sounds good. All right, here's a close one. Definitely close if you look at the wins above replacement. And I gave the nod to Henry Rechtenberg here on the strength of his offense, his top 407 OBP, and figured it was about time to throw a Las Vegas hustler on the ballot.
There you go. To me, it was very clearly between Thad Meyer and Henry Rechtenberg. I went with Meyer, and my logic was I probably spent more time thinking through this one than I thought of any of the others. The Rechtenberg had the lead, a very slight lead in weighted runs created and WOBA. Thad Meyer is quite clearly an elite defender and a much better defender than Rechtenberg. Mm-hmm. What actually struck me down with Thad Meyer or with Rechtenberg is that actually he's splitting his time between right field and left field, whereas Thad Meyer is playing right field pretty much full time. So if Rechtenberg actually, I think, was in right field the full time, his defensive ratings would be even lower, would be my guess. To me, I actually was upset because I felt like they're like equal. And I didn't know how to vote. Yeah. So I finally voted for Meyer because he plays right field almost exclusively, and Rechtenberg is splitting his time probably 60-40. Right. That was my logic.
That's good logic.
This is one that I have some enjoyment in waiting to see how the league comes out on.
Yeah, that's definitely going to be a good one to watch.
And that is something that I enjoy about the All-Star game and the balloting itself, is I do like to watch what the league does and how they interpret things differently from me. We have a lot of very educated and thoughtful general managers in this league, and I can learn stuff just from the way people do their voting. So
Yes, definitely.
designated hitter.
Designated hitter. Clearly, we don't have to worry about defense on this one, so it's just straight down the line of who's the best hitter right now. For me, that was Bartolo Ortiz of Phoenix. Not he's not quite at the top on the home runs, but the other guys that are ahead of him in home runs are not quite on his level as far as the on base. So that was a pretty easy one for me.
Yeah, and there's a few others that I could I expect will gather some votes, but to me it was Bartolo Ortiz. I guess the only defensive thing you could say is pick the heaviest guy because he holds down the bench best. I don't know. But yeah, that was where my vote was at. I could definitely support at least two or three other guys getting votes. So Mario Guerrero is one that I considered a little bit. Jose Vasquez from Louisville is another guy that I was.
I agree.
Let's talk about starting pitchers.
Sounds good. So what I'll do on starters is kind of do the same thing. Sort by WAR just to get an idea of who's kind of on the short list. That way I don't sort by rate stats and end up with somebody who's maybe a little shorter on the innings pitched or something like that. So from there I'll go to FIP because I like to take a look at that, and maybe I'll find a guy that's got a really good FIP, but he's been unlucky and his ERA is a little high. And then another thing I like to do, which Stats Pluses had been great for, is I'll sort by the strikeout percentage.
Oh, really? Interesting.
And then in combination with the walk percentage that shows up right next to it, I kind of just do a little K minus walk in my head, and just kind of see who's really striking people out and who's not allowing the walks, since theoretically that's two of the things that the pitchers have the most control over.
There you go. I like that. I hadn't thought about that. Learn something new every day.
Well, there you go.
So who'd you come up with?
All right, so my list is, of course, you keep in mind that I don't like to double up on teams if I can avoid it with another, acceptable, worthy candidate. So my list is Mauro Flores from Brooklyn, Arthur Dempster from Rockville, Egbert Benner from Jacksonville, Aki Kondo from San Antonio, and your old friend Lawrence Columbus Lelouch, now in Phoenix.
I did not actually vote for Lawrence Columbus Lelouch. The ultimate problem, and maybe it's because he was hurt just a little bit too early. The bottom line is, for me, his FIP and his ERA were not as strong as some of the other guys, and given that his WAR numbers are down a little bit, probably because he missed a few starts at the end. He ended up not. It actually pained me not to vote for him because it pains me to see him hurt again.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was with you with Flores and Dempster and Boehner. I included Francisco Ruiz from Brooklyn, and I did include Dan Cannon. It really struggled over Aki Kondo. Just couldn't get him in there on the FIP. I see the point there with the FIP, and also with Lelouch, his FIP is a little high also. But if you sort by the strikeout percentage for a second, and then you look at Kondo, he's 32%, 32.4% Ks, only 6.3% walks. Yep, that was interesting.
Which is just so far above anyone else that he just had to be on the list. And Lelouch, of course, at that league-leading 3.9% walk rate with a very solid 25.2% strikeout rate. He seemed to deserve it.
Yep. The other guy that was kind of the other two guys that were kind of on the fringe for me were Enrique Gomez and Riggs Carpenter. I
Uh-huh.
don't know how you pronounce Riggs. Maybe it's just Riggs
Yeah.
Carpenter. We'll just call him Carpenter.
Yeah, there you go.
Um, I'm expecting that San Antonio's rookie is going to be a mainstay in the All-Star game here pretty soon, but he was just a little on the
Yeah,
edge for
he's
me.
a little too much walks for me, but definitely.
I'm gonna have to think a little bit about Condo. Your K percentage to walk percentage thing has got me
Yeah, he's
rethinking about
definitely an
that.
outlier if you look at K minus walk.
Alrighty, let's talk about relief pitchers.
Sure. Relievers, in sort of a general strategy, I like to look at guys that are throwing a lot of innings, and um, keep just limiting the runs, and it's a lot. It's very similar to the starters. Are they striking people out? Are they limiting walks? Um, I've got Luis Ortega from Montreal, Sean Huber in Las Vegas, Celio Marin from Rockville, Jose Olivas in San Antonio, and Jose Torres in Brooklyn.
For me, relievers are a real shot in the dark. I mean,
Yeah,
I almost hate voting for relievers. um, and I end up doing a WAR thing, and that's never satisfying. And then I do a FIP thing, and that's kind of not satisfying. I will say that on occasion, this year there is not one that exists, but if a guy puts up, 25 or 30 saves in half of a year, I will sometimes do that for the base purposes of, that's a pretty unique year.
yeah,
I don't really like using saves because that has all the problems that saves has.
yeah,
But if somebody puts up a gaudy number and something like that, and that is the primary stat of a closer, um, then I will sometimes sway that way. But again, there isn't anyone that is really like that this year. We've got some 21, 20 save guys, which are just kind of, you'd expect there to be some guys like that. I ended up with Ortega, Huber. I went with my heart on the old guy, 38-year-old Steve Russell, because his 2.71 FIP just made me happy.
yeah.
Um, Call me wrong, I'm fine with that. But I
No,
just I just
that's
love that idea of him showing up at the All-Star game at
I
38.
like vote. Yeah,
I chose a couple of Mexico City relievers in Aaron Campbell and Pedro Castillo, again mostly for FIP oriented purposes.
hmm
Throw a bunch of guys at the wall and see who sticks as far
yeah.
as I'm concerned on this when it comes to the league.
Aaron Campbell definitely a good vote.
Alrighty, so I think that runs us through the entire Johnson League. That was kind of fun.
That was.
Want to spend some time on our beloved Frick League?
Yeah, let's do that.
I'm sure we'll have no difference of opinion on anything having to do with the
Oh
Frick
no,
League.
I'm sure. I'm sure.
Because you, like me, just write down the entire Yellow Springs 9 roster and,
Obviously,
and we go from
obviously.
there. Okay, maybe not. Let's start with catchers and let's see where we go here.
All right, catchers. Gosh, there's just a great candidate here, Songduk Sim, in Twin Cities. He's got the defense, he's got the offense. Maybe not quite as many home runs as you want out of your All-Star catcher, but everything else was did it for me.
Yeah, he's pretty clearly the selection. I debated Vancouver's Hata Papo, mostly just because you don't usually see a 400 on base percentage from a catcher. But Sanduk Sim is so much above Papo everywhere else that that debate didn't last more than about 3 seconds. So.
Yeah.
And I wanted to vote for Eric Fabre, the guy that I traded to Edmonton back some time ago, but maybe his time is coming another year or two. He's not quite where Sanduk Sim is right now, but that is actually something that we talked about before. Somebody who's been on your team before, or that you have a past history of. You're kind of looking for a reason to vote for him in that
Right.
sense. At least I am anyway.
Oh yeah, I am too.
Okay. So I think we're on the same page with catchers. Let's talk about first base.
All right, first base. Gonna just make everybody upset here and let you all know that I had the homer vote for Mark Simpson. Yeah, I just couldn't help myself. I can justify it. Well, I can't justify it. Taiho Wei, we should probably be the vote for everyone. You know, he's got Simpson beat in all the categories, but you know, and maybe this is the time to just discuss the Homer votes. You know, I think that the All-Star game should be fun, and if you know, if it means a vote that maybe not be 100% deserved to a surfer, then I'm going to do it.
I don't actually have any problem whatsoever with Homer votes as long as they are able to be justified in some reasonable way. And Simpson is actually a justifiable vote. You can say that, well, really he isn't. It will shock me to no end if Taiho Wei is not the landslide winner of this. But that having been said, just like we talked about doing the WAR cut, right? Really, there's kind of three guys when you do a WAR cut, because
Yeah.
Madison's Nathaniel Barrell can arguably be called in the mix, and in that sense, Barrell's weighted runs created in WOBA is slightly a touch above Mark Simpson's, also as far as that goes, right?
Right.
But Simpson wins as a defender, and Simpson is the elite defender of the collection of people we're talking about here. I mean, he's a
Absolutely.
4 zone rating above Taiho Wei, and it is justifiable to use that as an element of the criteria. If we were talking about me voting for Jose Garcia, that would be a bad Homer vote, right?
That probably would be.
Right. I cannot. I love Jose Garcia. He's doing exactly what I put him in place to do, but he is in no way, shape, or form going to the All-Star game.
Yeah.
Right. So, and we can talk about Homer votes again in a little bit, because I'll probably have one that will be somewhat questionable before it's all said and done. But
All
I can
right.
talk about why that's justifiable. And the other piece of it, quite honestly, is Mark Simpson is kind of a face of the franchise. I will look at players who are outside of my organization also and consider whether, because it's not so much that I think about it from the context of Hall of Fame stuff, but the All-Star game is a famey thing, you know, for those of us who are deep into the league. I like the storyline of the franchise faces being part of the game. It just, I don't weight
Yeah.
it very high, but
Absolutely. If you're gonna, you know, if you're only gonna have one or two guys from every team, then you know it should be the guy that is the face of the team.
yeah, if it's justifiable sense from a performance
Right.
standpoint. Or, you know, like, I mean, I vote with my heart. I don't have a problem with voting with my heart. You
Yeah.
know,
And we're not talking about, you know, the Hall of Fame here.
sure,
We're talking about an All-Star game.
there you go. So anyway, I don't, I would not hold you in any negative thoughts for a vote for Mark Simpson. I just don't think he's going to win.
Oh yeah. I don't think he'll win either, but
And quite honestly, that would be an interesting question. If I thought it was going to be extremely close, but Taiho Wei was the better player, that's the point where a Homer vote actually can possibly make a difference, right?
yeah.
So that's a more interesting question. Let us talk about second base.
All right. So, second base. Obviously, there's a surfer on the ballot, so I have to vote for. Okay, no, I really couldn't justify that one. But it was a really, really tough choice. Obviously, you've got Jared Gilstrom right there in competition for it, and that's probably the biggest name on the ballot. I mean, it's kind of stacked, honestly, second base this year.
Mm-hmm.
I ended up going with the youngster James Monger from Omaha. He just you know I think he just barely edged out Gilstrom as far as the offense goes, and you take a look at the defense as well, and he kind of, tacks on a little bit there.
I'm completely in your same boat, and we do the classic WAR split and then compare WOBAs and weighted runs created, and then I add in zone rating that shows Monger is top of the top three. I'll add in Claudio DeFazio for California, right, when we talked about that at the beginning of this podcast. And DeFazio is getting on base at a 283 clip, which is in that game, and he's slugging at 422, which is a little low, but not horrible. Here's an example. Maybe DeFazio will end the season as the best second baseman in the league. I would tend to doubt it because I think James Monger has been the best second baseman in the league for 2 years. But at the end of the day, Monger to me is clearly the choice to make here. And if it were close, I would probably go with Gilstrom for the same reason we talked about before, because he's got the name thing, right?
Right.
And Monger's got more years to come, but to me, it's not even really close.
Yeah, and then you also consider that Gilstrom plays for San Fernando. San Fernando is choosing the reserves this year, so
I have a feeling he's going to make it in.
Yeah.
The more interesting question is Mons Raider in that aspect, because Raider's got the name aspect. He is going to be a legendary. I mean, he's 26 years old and he's already got the legend. He's got 78 steals this year, so that would be a gaudy number that I would not be shocked at people voting for. But I just don't think that he makes it in context of Monger and Gilstrom. So he may even be left off the All-Star team completely, which would be kind of amazing.
It would be amazing. It would be unfortunate, but there's a lot of second basemen that are deserving this year.
Yeah, it's a big position these days.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about third base, where the obvious answer is my own Rob Thomas.
Yeah, it's that's.
I'm sure that's where your mind was at when you sat down to make your.
Oh yeah, definitely. I obviously
it wouldn't have anything to do with Michael Best from Long Beach. That I'm sure that probably never even crossed your mind to vote for Michael Best.
Never crossed my mind.
And his 4 WAR.
Yeah, this is going to be. I'm really interested to see who the league chooses here, because you definitely have these two guys in Thomas and Best that have kind of separated themselves from the rest of the pack. At least if after you set WAR aside and you look at the offensive stats. It's no surprise, obviously, that I voted for Best, and I think that it's, despite the second place in weighted runs created plus and WOBA, he's got a couple more home runs. He's hitting for a little higher average in OBP, and I just had to go with the Surfer.
Yeah, my actual honest, I voted for Michael Best also because to me that you talk about the separation. I think Michael Best has separated himself from everybody else. I think the more interesting question is who will come in second between Morales, Thomas, and Mendoza. And I would actually, in my heart, I'll pick Rob Thomas, but on a piece of paper with logic, I would go Emilio Morales. And the reason is that Rob Thomas is a platoon player. He cannot hit left-handed pitching. Right, and so he's having a great year, and I'd love to see him. I'm wondering whether he will end up being an addition just for the fact that we need a Yellow Springs 9 guy in there, and we're having a tough year. But if I were to say who's the best third baseman in the Frick Heartland, it would be Emilio Morales at Omaha right this minute. We'll see what the league does there. Obviously, my heart is with Rob Thomas, and I hope that he does well in the voting, but it's a long shot at best.
Yeah, I see that.
Okay, let's talk about shortstop.
All right, shortstop.
I think is a fascinating position.
Shortstop is a fascinating position. You've got a couple of guys that separate themselves with WAR, and then 3 guys that kind of are at the top offensively. Angel Zalapa came out on the top of my ballot, mainly on the strength of his offense, but also with the tiebreaker of he is the only one of the top offensive players that actually has that positive zone rating, which when you're talking about shortstop is kind of important.
Yeah, and actually, I have to take a step back and ask myself and do some research. I think it's enough to vote for him anyway because I've got him on my ballot. You know, he's only played 55 games. Has he been hurt, or is he a platoon guy? My guess is he's been hurt. I don't think he's a platoon guy.
He was injured at the end of April. He was out 5 weeks with a sore shoulder.
Yeah, so if you look at it and say, okay, WAR is a counting stat. His 2.4 WAR he's done in 5 weeks less than either of the other two guys, and he's an actual shortstop in the sense that he's a plus zone rating, and his OPS, WOBA, weighted runs created are all stronger than the rest of the guys. I don't even think this is close.
You mean you didn't want to vote for J.J. McQuaid?
I did not want to vote for J.J. McQuaid. I love J.J. McQuaid. I wish he were $5 million and on my team. I would have paid as much as $7 million to keep him on my team. But once Brett started throwing around the $20 million and he moved over to Long Beach, was he now 14 or 16? I don't know what he's at.
Yeah, I think he's down to about 14 now, so it's completely affordable.
There you go. But he's only double overpaid.
No, yeah.
Alrighty, let's go to left field.
Let's do that.
Agreed with Zalapa, so.
So, unfortunately, there were no surfers on this ballot, so I actually had to make a decision. It's so tight at the top. Do you want to talk about this one? Because I don't know that I have a good reason for my choice.
I don't know that there is a bad reason for any choice here. You do though. I like this one because this one's a pretty clear break on the WAR split, right? You got three guys that are 3.1 to 3.3 in Luis Castillo from Edmonton, John Hickman from Seattle, and Ray Cooper in Twin Cities. And I went with John Hickman. The reason I went with John Hickman is, their WOBAs are all really close. Their weighted runs created are all really close. Hickman's on the slight top of both of those guys. His zone rating is good, so his defense is equal essentially with Ray Cooper's there, 2.4 to 2.5. To me, this was just purely a very slight increase in WOBA and weighted runs created. Let's do it, because they're all three the same to me.
Yeah, that's who I went with, and for pretty much the same reasons.
I would fully expect that the fans in Edmonton and the fans in Twin Cities will be voting their asses off for those two guys.
That should be expected, and they would certainly be worthy if they got in.
Let's go to center.
All right, center field. I mean, this one is just one of the easiest votes of either league. Despite a little less defense than I'd like to see out of a center fielder. Grant Lee got my vote here just because his offense is so far above everyone else that I thought he should be the representative from center this year.
Yeah, I think that's clear. Grant Lee is the best center fielder in the league right now, and I've been expecting that since the time that Randy traded for him. The other piece of that is that if you look at the zone rating question from before, right, there's no just like super amazing defender to stand out and say that -2 zone rating that Grant Lee has is a real comparative disadvantage. The closest you can get is, who is it, Dennis French? Yeah, Boise's rookie center fielder is at 6.4, which is a fine zone rating, but it's not like 13.1.
Right. And when you're looking at 105 WRC plus compared to a 145 WRC plus, it just...
Yeah, so there wasn't any real reason to go beyond looking at Grant Lee. So let's go to right field.
Let's go. So I gave you your homer vote here with Andy McKinney.
I like you.
He's I think I really wanted to get somebody from Yellow Springs on the ballot, and I could make it. I could make the case here, despite there being two candidates from Long Beach. He was, you know, the top offensive player by a little bit on WRC Plus and WOBA, and not a terrible defender. So that's what did it for me.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, this was a interesting one for me. Obviously, I'm a fan of my rookie kid. He continues to astound me. Andy McKinney was not intended to play in the major leagues this year. He jumped from Double A into the majors purely because I had no choice when one of my other guys didn't pan out the way that I wanted him to. And the big issue here, this is a great example of the split between WAR versus everything else, right?
Mm-hmm.
Luis Maldonado from San Fernando, Wilton Rivera from Valencia, both of them have a few more at-bats, plate appearances.
Yeah.
Both of them hit for more power, and so they drive WAR a bit. So there is definitely a separation from WAR's standpoint. But then you overlay that with WOBA and weighted runs created, and Andy McKinney is the top guy on the list. At the end of the day, he's leading the league, I think, in doubles, which is to me I know Ted and I have had some conversations about doubles before, I think, and the gap rating, right? A double is a pretty big deal when it comes right down to it for me. It's one of my hidden secrets in Yellow Springs is if you look at our best years, we're almost always leading the league in doubles or up in that very top range of doubles.
Yeah, I'm with you on doubles. Very, very underrated.
So I will fully expect that Maldonado or Rivera are going to win this because their WAR number is such a gaudy delta, but I think that's kind of a hollow,
Right.
a hollow thing. And quite honestly, I would not trade Andy McKinney for either one of those two right this minute,
Yeah.
myself. But then I admit my heartstrings are tied up in that conversation. So
Of course.
anyway, thank you for your support.
You're welcome.
Let's go to designated hitter.
All right. This one again, purely on the basis of who's the best hitter right now. Even though I already voted for someone from San Fernando, Moreland was just so far ahead of the pack, despite his plate appearance gap with John Mick and his fewer home runs. He's just across the board hitting a little better this year, so he got my vote.
Yeah, John Mick from Madison, San Fernando's William Moreland are the two clear candidates. I voted for Moreland for the same reasons that you voted for Moreland. I would make an argument for Chris on John Mack, however, in that Mack is playing full-time, whereas Moreland is platooning most of his time. Which is one reason why his rate numbers are up. When he was in Des Moines, I think Ed had him hitting against left-handed pitchers, which dropped his numbers to a degree, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So this will be an interesting one to see there what happens, because Moreland's only got 296 plate appearances, which is 101 less than John Mick. So
Yeah,
so I can make an argument for Chris.
absolutely.
Starting pitchers in the Frick.
All right, starting pitchers in the Frick. This one, I found that this to be a difficult set to vote for, and I think I ended up kind of going with a mix of guys that are pretty good in FIP and guys that are pretty good in strikeouts, and a homer vote thrown in, of course. Not completely undeserved, I don't think, but I ended up with Pierre Legrand from Long Beach, Bobby Lynch in Edmonton, Freddie Delgado in San Fernando, Miguel Ramos in California, and Stephen Taub in Hawaii.
I think this is an interesting. I always find voting for pitchers to be difficult especially when Yellow Springs does not have any real, real candidates. Because I couldn't even bring myself to do the Homer vote at this stage for either Carlos Valle or Ernesto Ramos, as far as that's concerned. So that left me with 5 positions to fill. I voted for Bobby Lynch just because I want to see Bobby Lynch in the All-Star game.
Yeah.
I think that's a fantastic story, and he's worthy. He's on your ballot.
Yep.
I like your bit there about strikeout to walk percentages. He's got a quite brilliant one.
Yep.
I included Hiroki Rin also from Edmonton, just because his FIP is so strong. 2.32
Yes.
FIP is nothing to choke on. I think he's actually leading FIP. Yeah, when they do a FIP there.
He is. Yeah.
And then Miguel Ramos and Luis Gracia, California's 2 guys, again, are still top of the FIPS.
Yep.
So I went with them. They're also up on the WAR board, which of course is really dangerous for pitchers.
Yeah.
And then I went with San Fernando's Feliciano Rafael, just because, I mean, it's his time. He's 12-4. Win stats are gaudy, yes, but still 12-4 is 12-4. That says something about what he's doing for his team. The 3.12 FIP is not bad, and looking at strikeouts and walks, 23.8 to 3.9, I can live with that.
Absolutely. Yeah. No argument with any of those choices.
Yeah.
I for Rin and Gracia, definitely would have loved to have them on the ballot, but I kind of just limited myself. As I said, one of my philosophies is to
Right.
kind of spread the love. So I really just wanted to get some votes out to some other teams instead of making the All-Star game rotation a California San Fernando rotation.
Yeah, and I like that, and I can make an argument for the guys that you just picked. I can make an argument for probably 4 or 5 other guys that we haven't even talked about. Pierre Legrand actually has an argument. He's not just a flat out homer as far as that's concerned. He's got some really solid numbers.
Absolutely.
2.9 ERA is if a guy has a 2.9 ERA, he can go to the All-Star game,
Yeah.
right? San Fernando's got Ernie Kinney, who's doing the similar thing as far as that goes. Jimmy Greenwood in Calgary is a feel-good story. 2.97 and a 7-4 record in Calgary. That's a pretty nice performance as far as that goes.
Yeah.
So again, pitchers in particular, you can kind of go through and make a mix and match kind of a question. And that's actually one of the things I like about looking at the pitching numbers is that you can see an interesting scatter. So let's
Yes.
talk about relief pitchers.
All right, relief pitchers. I decided to go really heavy on the strikeouts with the relievers this year. So that put Manny Gabriel, Lorenzo Di Medici, Carlos Delgado, Bill Piddick, and Shotaro Kawamura from Seattle onto my ballot this year.
We were on the same page with Benavides and Delgado. I used basically the same kind of thought pattern on relievers as I do starters, with probably a heavier bent on FIP. But like we talked about with the Johnson League, I break my rules all the time when it comes to relievers in particular.
Yeah.
I had the homer vote that I definitely went with Momcilo Juretic. Momcilio? How do you pronounce Momcilio? Momcilo. I think he's actually the best relief pitcher in the league right this minute. Unfortunately, he's also hurt. He's thrown 67 innings, and I was actually surprised when he got hurt because I've actually maintained his usage rate relatively. I've been working very hard to maximize his usage while not getting him several days in a row and things like that. So be it a home pick or not, I personally I love him. I think he's a fantastic pitcher. He's thrown a 2.46 BABIP, which maybe is lucky. I don't know, but there you go. I also have Tiosuke Suzuki, Edmonton's guy. I also have Shotaro Kawamura and Carlos Delgado's. Did you have Caleb Benavides, Boise's? I don't remember whether that was on your list or not.
I did not,
Okay.
but
He's my 5th guy.
That, yeah, that's
So
definitely a good picture there.
a similar kind of thing there. You'll notice that none of my guys are necessarily big save guys. I'm not really looking for the top savers. I
Yeah, neither.
debated really strongly though about Jose Canales because he's got 29.
Yeah,
the
yeah.
The problem was is his secondary numbers to me were just so bad that I could not justify doing the big hunkin' number, right? I mean, I
Yeah,
can't put a 3.2, 4.65 FIP guy in over some of the other guys who I just thought were more worthy.
yeah, completely agree. I didn't even look at I don't even look at saves, and that's a prime example of why you shouldn't look at saves because if you compare the other numbers, he's not even in the same zip code as the other guys.
Now, I think it's fair if he were in the same zip code that you look at it and say, okay, does that, does he hold a particular spot on his ball club?
Yeah,
But you put one of the other guys that we just talked about on either of our ballots, or probably several others we could go through, put him in those same situations that Canales is in, and they'd have 29 or 40. You know.
right.
Alrighty, so I think we've been through the entire list. Do you have anything else that strikes you when it comes to our All-Star process?
No, I just it's always interesting seeing who everybody votes for. I think that every year there's a few guys that after the votes are all cast, I kind of look at and say, that was I didn't consider him too much, but I find it very interesting that the rest of the league felt that way.
Well, and how much of that do you think is homerism? How much of that difference do you think is honest opinion? How much do you think is because, unlike real GMs, we have other things to do in our lives, and so sometimes we miss things?
I think sometimes it's just because I missed somebody, I missed something about somebody that made him all-star worthy, and I think sometimes it's just you get some GMs that are busy and maybe they'll just sort by WAR and go straight down the ballot with the highest WAR and it ends up being enough to get a guy in and there's nothing wrong with that, you know?
Yeah, and definitely sometimes times of the year where I'm really super busy and I don't have the time, and we do have a requirement to vote, right? If you don't
Right.
vote, you actually lose points. So if there is a default and I only have 3 minutes and I got to vote, I don't have any problem with somebody doing a war split and just saying, "Hey, that's I'll vote. I'll vote my home team and I'll vote for the best war." And sometimes I think that happens.
Absolutely.
And again, I don't have
Yeah.
any problem with that. Overall, I think that the results of our All-Star voting in the BBA, relative to some of the other leagues that I've been in, is just outstanding.
Absolutely. I definitely agree.
So I don't have I can complain day to day, moment to moment on anybody, but again, I think this league is just outstanding when it comes to the passion that it brings and the knowledge that it brings. And as long as people have enough time to get into it, they do a fantastic job.
Definitely.
Alrighty, so there we have it. Those are the kind of ways that you and I look at things, sometimes the same, sometimes differently. Sometimes we look at, one of the things I found most interesting was sometimes we look at it from the same process and still come up with a different name. So that's always fun.
Yeah, it just kind of speaks to everybody's individual preferences and slight just the very small differences that end up making you choose one person over another.
The Brewster Baseball Association is an out-of-the-park baseball league commissioned by Mr. America himself, Matt Rechtenwald, and competed in by an amazing group of outstanding general managers. Check us out at montybrewster.net. You have been listening to Dorks Being Dorks, a podcast where we put BBA GMs together to talk about out of the park and how it works in the BBA. Music is Some of My Fears by Daisy May and is used under a Creative Commons Attribution License.
I have lost everything. Just like the bucks are dead on the rain. The cross has twisted, the stars that will shine.